Well, hello everyone. I'm Jill Bloom, publisher of Roofing Contractor, Walls and Ceilings, and Building Enclosure. Today is May 12th, 2020. Thank you so much for watching, wherever you may be watching from. I'm here today with Art Eisner, the editor of Roofing Contractor, and Trent Cotney, who's the CEO of Cotney Construction Law. Gosh, I have to say, I'm so grateful that lawyers are essential. So we have had the opportunity to get all the questions answered that are sent to us so we can ask to Trent. And as many of you know, Trent battles legal issues for all contractors, especially since he has 14 offices across the country, 40 attorneys, 4 customer service reps, and you can follow him on Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever it may be on your social to stay up with his legal insights and all his videos for contractors across the nation. So Trent, it's been, each week seems to change and evolve, but can you tell us what are some of the top hot topics that you've seen and have been hearing about this week?
Sure. First and foremost, I want to thank you, Jill, and Art for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you guys. I consider you friends, but it's also good to talk shop as well. So, and I want to welcome all the contractors that are out here listening to us. It's been real interesting. These as we start to reopen, it's a whole new set of issues that we've started to see evolving, and a lot of those are return to work issues. You know, we've had debates here internally about, do we call people back? How does that work? What are the guidelines? What are the rules? And our customers are calling us, and we're getting questions from contractors wanting to understand, what's the process there? How do we go about doing that? And what's sort of best practices? And what we say is it needs to be a gradual return. Okay, it's better not to really take a strong arm approach to bringing your people back to work. Do it gradually. Make sure that you're taking the proper protections and guidelines, following CDC and OSHA guidelines within your company, so that it gives your employees that assurance, that reassurance that they need to come back and work. Some other things that they should consider are staggering work, maybe having a start time for some employees and then have the next wave come in at lunch or something like that. Figuring out ways to maximize office space so that you're creating that social distancing. And again, it's about just creating that level of safety and making sure that people are aware of it out there. Then I'd say the other issue, the biggest issue that we've got, Jill, are these phone calls that we've been getting from contractors that have had crew members test positive for COVID on job sites or after they're done with the job. And the questions that we get are, what do I have to do? Who do I have to tell? Do I have to send everybody home? And obviously every situation is different, but we always start off by saying, look, you need to check with the employees that had contact with this individual, okay? Figure out the duration that they were exposed to them. So the CDC guidelines, there's one that says 10, there's another guideline that says 30 minutes. What we're saying is 10 minutes or less, you need to know that, okay? If somebody had exposure for 10 minutes or longer, then they're in that sort of danger zone, okay? And then the other thing that you got to look at is proximity. Where are they within 6 feet? Okay. The other thing that I often ask when I'm kind of going through my list of questions when I have these calls, I say, hey, what kind of shared equipment or shared space was there on that job site? Did they use the same ladder? Okay. Did they use same equipment? Did they have access to, the job site trailer, whatever it might be? Because what you want to do is figure out, where were the exposure sites? Now, here's something critical that a lot of contractors don't realize is the CDC guidelines and the OSHA guidelines, they're just that, they're guidelines. Okay, now your state may have some mandatory requirements like you have to wear masks or whatever it might be, but these are just guidelines. So the question that I get a lot is, Trent, do I have to tell my employees if a subcontractor on this job got sick with COVID? Okay, and the answer is there's nothing that requires you to necessarily tell anybody, but from a safety standpoint, you want to ask those questions. You want to identify who was exposed, and then you want to have them stay home or get the all clear from a doctor before they're coming back. If they weren't directly exposed, and we're talking about duration and proximity, right? More than 10 minutes, less than 6 feet. If they weren't really exposed, there's no requirement that you tell them, but you have to balance legal with just being a good employer, right? You have to say, okay, do I want to tell these employees about this issue? Because if they find out from somebody else and I haven't told them, it just makes me look bad as an employer. So some of it is just doing the right thing as opposed to legal. But as it stands now, it's a quagmire because more and more, I'm not seeing the number of cases diminish, and the stats say the same thing. They're not diminishing. What's happening is more and more crew members are getting sick, and it's becoming a bigger issue. These jobs are being shut down because of it. So making sure that for those of you that are listening to this, take the time now to go ahead and get your SOP in place to understand what happens if I have an employee that gets sick on a job. What do I have to do? Take the guesswork away from it so that you're not scrambling the day of when it happens.
Thanks, Trent. That's some great insight. I appreciate you sharing that. Hello, everybody. I want to pick up with a follow-up there. If employers are not, if they don't disclose, do they run the risk of that information, getting around through the rumor mill and, employees talk, or certainly if someone's sick, doesn't show up, and can that kind of come back to haunt contractors too?
Yeah, I mean, look, any employer has to be concerned about not just reputation management, but liability, and there's really two ways to look at this from a liability standpoint. One is you've got somebody that you know is sick, you've removed them from the job, but others were potentially exposed to them, and you don't say anything. Okay, if that customer gets sick, or if another trade gets sick, then you have liability from third parties, okay, because you knew something about it and you didn't take any precautions, okay, regardless of what the guidelines are. Now, the other situation is where if you know you have an employee that's sick and you know they fall within that, you had another crew, let's say you got a crew of 4 working on a residential project, okay? If the other 3 were in close proximity and within a duration that exceeded 10 minutes and you don't tell them, and one of them gets sick and then causes other people to get sick, you might have potential liability for that. So there's always a fine line, and the discussion is usually, employers don't want to scare everybody. And people, it's interesting to see how people react to this pandemic. There are some people that are reactionary, there are other people that are like, but you don't want to scare your employees, but at the same time, you want to protect them. We all want our employees to go home safe every single night, right? We wouldn't be in business if we didn't want that. So you need to really look at all the facts of the situation. You need to always remember that they will probably find out if somebody is sick. That crew member will talk, okay, and say, hey, I'm sick. I told the employer, and the employer didn't tell you. Or they may hear it from a job. Your job may be shut down. They may be asking questions. So you need to really think about it. Now, here's one thing I didn't mention, Art, that I do want to mention. And I want to make sure that the contractors listening to this pay attention. If you got somebody that's tested positive for COVID, keep in mind under EEOC guidelines, your other employees, you can not only ask them questions, okay, so you can say, do you have a fever? Have you had cough? Do you have any of the symptoms of what COVID is? But you're allowed to take their temperatures. And you want to take their temperatures before they get on that job site. Don't recontaminate the job site by taking their temperature out on the job. Do it at the home office. And here's something, best practices for taking temperatures. And I know I'm getting into this a little bit, but this is important. Okay, you don't want to have another employee take another employee's temperature without taking precautions. You can do that, but they need to be masked up, they need to be gloved up, they need to deal with proper disposal of that stuff. Better practice is to have a thermometer, have the employee pick up the thermometer, take the test, put the thermometer down, look at the thermometer and say, okay, you're good or you're not good. Okay, you don't want to expose more employees by taking the temperature, which is designed to prevent employee exposure. So just make sure that you're thinking, using some common sense there, and obviously don't use the same thermometer, to the extent that you can, or make sure that it's sanitized before reuse.
Okay, and I think those guidelines are certainly evolving too. So I guess they need to keep track and keep in touch with you to get the latest.
Sure.
Some of this sounds similar to, I was going to ask you about in Washington State, read about their high-risk employees workers' rights proclamation.
Mm-hmm.
Does some of what you're talking about fall into that? And are there other states taking similar action to specifically address what happens when COVID is on a construction site?
Yeah, so Washington's proclamation was pretty. It was. I wouldn't say I've never seen it before, because we had something very similar in Illinois that happened. But the governor out there, Governor Inslee, he came out with a set guidelines that said that they were very concerned about employees that were high risk, that were being exposed to COVID or were in that sort of high risk area. And they wanted to make sure that health benefits were maintained regardless. And this is very interesting. Anytime you have a government, whether it's state or federal, requiring insurance be held on somebody that's not otherwise there, and creating specific guidelines that that sort of reinvent some of the rules for employers retroactively, it's a very interesting situation. This was concerning, I guess, for a lot of the Washington contractors that we represent. We have a Portland office, and I'm licensed in Washington, so I interact with a lot of contractors out there. What was more concerning, and I think I mentioned it in one of our previous talks, was the Illinois Workers' Compensation Committee came out and said that there was a presumption that if you get sick, you got sick on the job. Okay, it's rebuttable, meaning that the employer can prove that that's not the case, but that's crazy. That's crazy. I mean, think about that. It's guilty until you're proven innocent. It takes everything that workers' comp is and flips it on its head. Okay, so fortunately, CRCA, the Chicago Association up there, and several other associations, contractors, retailers, everybody rose up. They filed suit. Right now, that rule has been overturned, but there's going to be additional discussions on a task force that comes up to deal with that. So my advice to the contractors out there is don't sit on the sidelines. Okay, you've got to be actively involved with your local, your state, and your federal politicians. Make sure that your voice is heard. Okay, because I'm surprised when I interact with politicians, and I try not to interact with them too much, but when I talk to them, I'm always surprised at sort of their misunderstanding of what trades do. They have this perception of what a contractor is, and it couldn't be further from the truth. So what I like to do is just make sure we're educating, telling these politicians what it's about so that they understand the real world dynamics of what it requires to be a contractor, especially in vertical construction. So I would encourage everybody to stay active, stay alert, pay attention to what's going on, make sure your voice is heard, because you'll have rules like this come down and they mean well, but the impact to employers, especially in this time, is critical.
Sticking to politics for a minute, Congress is back in negotiations. What are you hearing about the latest round of congressional stimulus funding?
Mm-hmm. A lot of politics involved. So again, red, blue, green, I don't care. You tell me what the rules are, I'll figure out how to play them. That's from an employer standpoint, that's how I've always dealt. The issue here is that there has been some additional stimulus money suggested. I've heard everything from $5,000 a person to $2,000 a month. Generally what we're hearing is the Democrats are for this. The Republicans tend to be against allowing additional stimulus type funds. Where it plays out at the end, I don't know. I think the concern is that there is a price to pay for printing all this money. Okay, there's a price to pay for states doing it. Nevada recently declared a state of economic emergency. The unemployment, it sounds great. There's all this extended unemployment and all this other stuff that's happened because of some of these acts that have come out. But at the end of the day, if that money runs out, and we're in this time next year, there's not going to be a lot to necessarily be able to, see it through. So one of the concerns that I think I have is kind of moving forward. You're going to see this interplay of politics, especially in an election year. And it's going to be interesting to see what really happens. I don't know what the future holds for it. I do anticipate there's going to be some additional stimulus. I do anticipate there will be some infrastructure stimulus. Okay, and one of the things I've said in the past is we really need to make sure vertical construction is part of that stimulus package, not just roadway, utility improvements, bridge construction. I want to see, schools and post offices and, anything that involves federal or state funding. I want to make sure we're talking about ground up, so that our walls, our roofers, all the contractors involved in that have the capability to continue to do work and benefit off of government funding.
You talked last time we talked about roofers' lien rights and how important that can be heading into peak season. Is there anything more you can touch on that? It was really mostly in terms of anticipating problems with accounts receivable as we get further into the crisis. But any guidance or pointers?
Sure. So lien rights are very tricky. There's a variety of things that keep me up every single night. Liens are one of them because they're the kind of thing where if you miss it, you're done. Okay, there is no, well, I missed it by a day, mea culpa. There's none of that. You're done. So the biggest thing that contractors sort of falter on is a lot of states require preliminary notices depending on if you're a subcontractor or if you're a prime contractor, meaning if you have a contract with an owner, there's a certain set of rules. If you're a subcontractor, there's another set of rules. And a lot of contractors don't think about their lien rights until they haven't been paid. And in some states, like the state of Florida, for example, it's too late. Okay, you've got to be able to give that preliminary notice if you're a subcontractor. So what I recommend is getting up to speed on what the timing requirements are. Okay, whether it's 45 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever the time requirements are, calendar 15 days before it's due at a minimum. Okay, and that way you're preparing. There's nothing worse for us, for example, when we get that call from a contractor saying, "Oh, our lien rights expired today." Oh, okay, really? Let's get together everything and figure everything out as quickly as we can so we can get it filed. The problem is that doesn't leave any room for error. So if something comes up after the fact, or if you realize you underliened, let's say you didn't include change orders or some other things that you could have included, it's difficult. It's difficult to revive it after that point. Most states, once you file it and you're past that, if you go past that deadline, you're done. Okay, and there's not an amendment process in most states after that deadline passes.
Wow, and every state has its own deadlines, presumably.
Absolutely different, every single state. So it's something we have a spreadsheet here in the office where it kind of goes through each of the requirements for every state, because we work in almost every state, and it's very, very different. I can literally go from one state to the next, completely different guidelines.
Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit to some recent survey data collected by ClearSeas Research, our research in data wing at BNP Media. So most recently, our survey data again showed kind of parallel to last week's. About 70% of our contractors said they saw a decline in new business activity. But there were some gains in active business and planned business. Those went above 50%, really for the first time since we started our surveys a little over a month ago. So kind of a mixed bag, but anything standing out from that, and is it possibly showing some strength in construction?
Yeah, I think we're very lucky to all be in construction. Thank God I'm in construction, because we're one of the few industries that have been essential from the get-go. If we were in the restaurant industry or hospitality, travel, anything like that, we probably wouldn't be talking right now. I'd be in an unemployment line somewhere. So, I think from that standpoint, construction has been very lucky. The other thing I would say is contractors, and I've lived around contractors my whole life. Most of my friends are contractors or in construction, and there's something that is different about somebody in construction. And it's a couple of things. One is they understand the value of hard work, okay, and they're not afraid to work hard. They've worked with their hands, they've worked with their tools, they've worked with their minds their whole life, and they're not afraid of hard work. And the other thing is ingenuity. And I think that for the contractors that are listening to this, you guys know what I'm talking about. We improvise, we adapt, and we overcome. That's what construction does, and hustle. Contractors out there, especially business owners, you got to be a little bit of a gambler to be in construction, but we are hustlers, and that's it. And we'll figure out a way to get it done. And I think that's what separates this industry from a lot of other industries, because we're not used to handouts. We're not used to having to rely on others. We go out there and get it ourselves. So I think that's what you're seeing in these stats, that, yeah, the new business, the opportunities might be out there. And I think that's a result of that mindset. But I think, there is going to be a decline. We're going to have to deal with it. But, I'd always put my money on construction. So.
We also found another 36% reported no anticipated changes to their workforce in the next 90 days. Obviously, roofers are reluctant to get rid of their quality workers for any reason. Is that kind of what we're seeing here?
Yeah, I think, not just for roofing, but any trade that's out there. I think the skilled crew, they're going to remain employed. I think if there's any layoffs, it's going to be the office staff. It's going to be sales staff. It's going to be marketing. It's going to be that kind of stuff. But skilled crews are hard to come by. You know, I've got several contractors that are dead in the water right now, and they're just paying crews to do charity projects because they don't want to lose the crews. And that's the kind of thing. It's very hard to find skilled labor. Even though unemployment is at an all-time high, they're still not skilled. So you can get plenty of cleanup crews, but you can't get anybody that actually knows how to, you know, do anything, install stucco, put on a roof, do anything that needs to be done. So there's going to be a gap there. Now, I think what's going to happen is I think there's been a lot of disillusionment with colleges in general as a result of this and the educational system. And I think you're going to see there's been a big trend towards vocational. I think it's going to pick up now. I think you're going to see a lot of people want to work with their hands, embrace the trades, recognize that it's a business that will exist in good times and bad. So I think you're definitely going to see a pickup trend there in vocational training.
Got it. Not a bad time to invest in trade schools or
Oh, yeah.
community colleges if
Right.
got it. Yeah, talking a little bit about that and training people up. Have you had clients talk to you about how they can initiate training now in this COVID-19 world? Are toolbox talks still? Are they still safe?
Right. So we've switched to virtual, and that's one of the things that I'm seeing over and over again. You know, we have toolbox talks that we've prepared on COVID, and a lot of other you know, companies have done the same thing. But really, we're seeing just a huge shift towards, you know, both HR and safety training being virtual. Now, the problem with some safety training is that there's a hands-on element. So you got to have some element of hands-on to see it. You know, it's one thing to watch it on a video. It's another thing to actually feel how much something weighs, to understand swing radius or how to install an anchor or how to install a window correctly within a frame. There are certain things that need to be done out in the field in order to understand that, both from a training aspect, workforce training, and from a safety aspect. So one of the things that I have seen contractors start to really embrace, and I think last week, Art, we were talking about how we're going to see sort of exponential innovation, is really embracing, you know, VR and augmented reality. You know, I think you're going to see increased virtual reality and augmented reality to try to create real world situations that allow people to get a better experience for safety training and workforce training. There will always be some hands-on element, you know, especially with the way that we're doing stuff right now. In the future, don't know where that is, but big push for virtual. There's a lot of ways that you can communicate virtually now that you had in the past, but you didn't really think about it. Now everybody's thinking about it. So.
Right. The urgency is really kind of, stepped up there. Let's
Right.
Keep talking about technology, drone usage, certainly on the upswing in roofing before all this happened. Our editorial director, Rick D'Amato, wrote a few months back about the FAA's desire to really hone in and start tracking drone flights, which kind of set off some alarms with our contractors. There's been some development in that just in the last week or so. Have you been following, and what can you tell our contractor friends about that?
I have. So I read Rick's article and it was great, very timely. And this is a very interesting area of the law. And what I've always said is the government always tries to play catch up with where reality is. It tries to create regulations. There's usually a gap between technology and the regulations needed to kind of make sure that they're in check. So this is some of that. And I think what's happened is drone usage has expanded. I mean, you think about 15 years ago, drones were those giant predator drones flying over Afghanistan. Then it became, using drones for fancy photos and flyover videos. And then after that, it became, using it for takeoffs and infrared and, even attaching tools and all kinds of other things to drones for usage. The biggest thing that I think caused this sort of sea change within the FAA was probably Amazon's announcement that it was going to start using drones for package delivery, which makes sense, but there's a lot of regulation and a lot of concern that people have with that happening. So the 8 parties that were sort of named to this task force, Amazon happens to be one of them, and they're probably going to be one of the biggest users. What was interesting is I want to make sure I get it right. DJI is a Chinese drone maker. It's the biggest drone maker in the space. They were not included within that task force. So that was kind of interesting. And what I think is going to happen is you're going to see certain regulation. It's going to be tracked, just like flights are. You're going to be able to figure out who's doing what, when they're doing what. And the days of just being able to take out your drone and throw it up and do something, I think are probably going to be over without somebody knowing about it. What I recommend for contractors that are thinking about using drones or are currently using drones is a couple of things. One, consider using a third-party company to do it. And if you don't have a third-party company, consider creating another company and having that company do the drone, okay? Have that company be the drone operator, run the drones, own the drones, all that kind of stuff for liability purposes, okay? And the reason I suggest that is, you don't want to be, let's say you're doing some vertical construction out on a home or a building, and you put up a drone to catch some photos or whatever else, and it hits an electrical line and knocks out electricity for the block, or God forbid does something worse, okay? You don't want to be on the hook for that. So it's a better idea to make sure that you've got a separate company from a liability perspective. Now, obviously, you want insurance, you want to be protected, all those kinds of things. You want to talk about, how you're going to use drones in your contract. But to circle back, what I think what I think we're going to start seeing is I think we're going to see a steady stream of drone traffic. And I think that's what they're envisioning here. So imagine this, imagine if every pizza you ordered, every takeout you ordered, every package you had delivered, whether it's from UPS, FedEx, the post office, Amazon, whatever it might be, it's all coming via drone. Okay, imagine the amount of traffic that would be. And I think that is what the FAA is trying to address right now, is that it's coming. It's absolutely coming. It would create efficiencies. How that looks, how safe that is, I don't know. It's exciting. I tend to geek out on the tech stuff, so anything like this, I'm very interested in. But that's kind of what I'm seeing right now.
Wow. So yeah, we're going to need a whole division of drone traffic control towers.
Right. Yeah.
Monitor all this. It's pretty wild, but I do think it's really interesting that the FAA got over 53,000 comments on this idea. And even though there isn't a rule in place, they've already started, developing how they're going to start tracking this, or at least creating the technology to do it. So it's pretty much a foregone conclusion. We're going to see tracking.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And instead of seeing birds in the sky, it's going to be drones now. And it's what's really interesting. And I was telling my son this the other day. He's like everybody else out there. He's being homeschooled, so. I was trying to teach him a lesson, and I just said, you can't walk outside now without a camera seeing exactly what you're doing. And especially with drones now, it's the same thing. Thank God it wasn't that way in college. But if with everything that we got going on now, it's privacy is gone, and people just have to kind of adapt to that. They need to understand that with this increased efficiency, with this increased technology, there's also a sacrifice of privacy. So what I think you're going to see is as the FAA starts to cycle through these rules, there's going to be a lot of consumer groups that are concerned about privacy and how that interacts with the amount of drone usage that I think you're going to see. I think the way that drones are used and the way that they look are going to change to accommodate bigger loads and bigger capacities and bigger capabilities. But you are going to see some kickback for privacy concerns.
Wow. Okay. Lots to keep track of there. I do want to wrap up our final question here. In the last week, FRSA did declare they are canceling this year's expo, which is obviously sad news. I know it's in your home state. How many have you been to? And I guess what do you think the impact is of that event not happening?
Sure. So FRSA is my family, obviously. Lisa Pate and everybody over there does a fantastic job, and with them for 20 years now, and consider them my family. So it's a tough decision. We're all having to make these choices and these changes, and obviously safety and health is a concern, and I recognize that there's always going to be issues there. But I think it's also opportunity for a lot of associations out there to look towards, new and different opportunities. So, I kind of look forward to what the future holds. I think that, like with everything, I think you're going to see a lot more innovation. And, thank God for associations. If you're a contractor listening to this, I don't, it doesn't matter if you're roofing or your walls or whatever it might be. If, associations are a great way for you to learn information and to get involved. And I encourage you to take a look, because a lot of times, they're on the front lines, they're hearing the stuff, and they're sort of making sure that your voice is getting heard as well. So.
Okay. Thanks as always, Trent. I really appreciate it. Jill, throw it back to you.
Yes, Trent, thank you so much. I know it's a crazy time as we're all trying to figure out where to go and how to congregate and when will we be able to congregate. So we appreciate all you do for associations. It's kind of how we've been here really at BNP. It's how we've been taught from the top down from Tag Henderson, our CEO, our co-CEO, is that, associations are great for everybody. So it's been fun getting to know you through FRSA as well as the others. But again, I want to thank everybody who's watching today. Please, if you are not subscribed, please go to roofingcontractor.com or wconline.com and subscribe to our digital editions, our e-newsletter, so we can stay up to date with all our great videos here with Trent. And Trent, if anyone needs to reach you, can you quickly say your website?
Sure, just cotneycl.com. Feel free to email me at tcotney@cotneycl.com, and our phone number is on that website.
Fabulous. So yeah, everybody stay safe and healthy and have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you.